And welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Bubba the Bat Flip, episode 75, your relief pitcher review. We're like 2 weeks away from the season starting, so it's the last positional thing we're going to do. We'll get that covered for you, some battles, some ADP debates, and a lot of awesome listener questions to get you ready for this big weekend of draft action. You can find me on Twitter at @BDentric, and my co-host, as always, on Twitter at BatFlipCrazy. Is he wearing the Padres hat to mourn Austin Nola or not? I can't figure it out. But Toby, how are we doing?
Oh, man, I'm a fortunate man. I have 0 shares of Austin Nola right now this year. I guess it pays to pay up at catcher, Bubba. That's what I'm learning. No,
You've had
I'm just kidding.
You've had some fun this week between the catchers, like you're standing your ground, and then Vlad Guerrero's going nuts right now. So your mentions are probably like half your mentions have to be like ha ha ha, and it's spring training.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like even with Vlad, so this is where my bias, like my confirmation bias or whatever. I don't know if it's confirmation bias, whatever my bias is, seeps in, right? So Vlad has this great game, 4 for 4, whatever, 3 RBI, and so I'm like, oh, I got to check out this box score and see what was really going on. And then it's like, oh, it was against Aaron Nola. Well, whatever. But then like I look at the Baseball Savant box score. One of his hits. He didn't hit any homers. One of his hits was a single that had an expected batting average of 140. And one of his doubles had a launch angle of 2 degrees. So it was on the ground, hit hard, right? But still, it's like, all right, so there's nothing to see here. I mean, he hit a couple balls hard, great job, wonderful, congratulations. I mean, I know I'm digging it pretty deep here with the Vlad Jr. stuff. I mean, and it is what it is, right? Like, I'm not a fan of his. I've articulated my reasons for why that is. And he could blow up and he could be good. But if I were to abandon my moral and ethical compass and go against what I truly believe, then who would I be?
Just be another fantasy analyst. No, I'm just kidding. Recency biased.
I mean, like, why even be on here if like every single thing I see is like, this guy is not there yet, which doesn't mean he won't get there, And that's the thing is, if I'm wrong, I'll be the first one to say I was absolutely wrong. I missed out on Vlad. I'm really sorry. And then the second thing I'll say is it really doesn't matter because where you're drafting Vlad, I mean, he's not going to win you a league because of what he does. Famous last words. When you draft him in the 3rd round, like I think people are going to draft him, or in the 4th round. And so I'll just hang back. I'll just like relax back and wait and watch all those really good hitters like Jose Abreu fall deeper and deeper into drafts. Just grab them and you'll be like, well, Vlad went 285 with 25 home runs and 85 runs and 90 RBI. And then I'll be like, well, Jose Abreu, who I took it around later because you were pushing up all those guys, is, he did that and more because he's on a better offensive team. Because the Blue Jays are a little overrated again this year.
Oh, I'm talking bad about the baby Blue Jays now, man. I think my internet's going out.
I'm just kidding. I love the baby Blue Jays. I love the baby Blue Jays. I just think, I expect some steps back from Teoscar this year. I know you don't.
No, I do. I have Gurriel being better than Teoscar. Teoscar, we saw his ceiling last year. Like he's still going to be good, but we saw his ceiling. Don't draft for that. Otherwise, you're already losing. So
totally, yeah. But who knows? We may have seen them great. I think George Springer's going to be great there. I think that's a tremendous.
It's going to help a ton. Simeon's going to help a ton.
Simeon's great.
They made really good additions. Really good additions to the lineup.
I love those additions.
Yeah. So the biggest question is, can Rowdy Tellez play enough? That's what I want to see.
I know. Yeah. I mean, they should.
They should. They really should.
Very skilled. I'm tempted.
Even this spring, like all the StatCast games he's in, his exit velocities and everything is just ridiculous. Yeah, it's good. Yes, Cubby, no, you're here for the Whittegren propaganda, and you came to the right place. Thank you.
You did. You did.
I just want to come out and say, obviously, if you're listening to this, you guys listen to enough shows. When I see people now touting Whittegren as the guy, and they think they're the first ones to do it, I'm gonna start pulling back episodes because I've been Team Whittegren from the get-go. Like it was never an option. So I'm just gonna throw that one out there. But
yeah, we're just Team non-Karinchak.
Yes, non-Karinchak, exactly.
Non-Karin, I don't know.
You were thinking of something.
I was gonna try to do something there, but I couldn't quite make it work. But I mean, I think, and the thing about it too is, It's okay.
Yeah.
You can like Wicker and you can draft him. You can draft him ahead of us. That's fine. Yep. This is the game that we play, right?
Yep. Exactly. We play chess while you play checkers. No, I'm just kidding. But one more thing before we get into the relief pitcher. So I started a new OC qualifier today, and it's a 2-hour clock. And it started up this evening because it finally filled. And I had the number 1 pick, so I took Soto because that's my guy. That's who I'm planting my flag with, and you can make arguments for many of them. But that's not the point of this topic right here. So the 15th pick overall, the 3rd pick of round 2. But remind you, this is not an overall. This is you win your league, you win an OC for next year. Top 3 guys get money basically. The 3rd place gets $50, gets their money back, and then 100, and then you get a ticket. 15th pick overall, Adalberto Mondesi.
Wow,
I can't stomach that. In an overall, I can see your discussion. In a non-overall, not at 15. Like I like him still, but not at 15. Like that's a steep price for me.
It is a steep price. I mean, the one thing that I would say is first place is all you care about, right? Yeah. So maybe that person goes into it and they're like, you want to know something? I'm going to shoot my shot right here.
Yeah.
Like if I'm going to put it on Mondesi, and if Mondesi is good this year, then my team's going to be really good. And if he's not, then I'll finish, in the back of the pack and whatever.
And at the same time, he probably wasn't making it back to 33. So he's probably thinking about that going, okay, because honestly, if he would have been there at the turn, maybe I would have debated it. Yeah. So it could have been something that maybe that's part of it too. What we've said before is if you're at the end, you got to go get your guys. Maybe that's his way of getting his guy. I don't know, but it surprised me. It's the highest I've seen him go in a draft I've been a part of.
God, don't remind me. I'm drafting from the 2 spot in my first main on Saturday.
Yeah,
from the 3 spot. Sorry, so not like super end, but
you'll get one. You'll get one of your guys.
The guys aren't going to get.
You'll get one of your guys back, at least. So. Yeah, I thought about that when you posted it because even when I saw my KDS draw and I got first, in years past, you're over the moon about that. I literally was like, shit. Like, because I already know my 2nd and 3rd round picks are going to be, I'm going to be putting in work to get what I want type thing. So, Gold Team League, though, not as bad as 15. Not as bad as 15. So,
and I just want to say, I apologize if I look to the side a little bit during this podcast. I'd mentioned this to Bubba, but I'm sweating a DFS. Tournament. It's not looking good, so I'll probably stop looking over there. But I had a really stellar start to my I don't know what it's slate or whatever today. Slate. Yeah. I had like 240 points with LeBron and Kuzma left, and LeBron and Kuzma, especially Kuzma, isn't doing anything. So oh well.
Yeah, we'll see. Long ways to go. Basketball's goofy like that, but
I know.
Let's talk relief. Let's talk relief pitcher review. And I just kind of made a little bit of groupings here. Some debates. We've kind of talked about them a ton, and most of them it's kind of is what it is at this point in the draft. But if anybody's keeping track at home, we're using online NFBC ADP from March 1st. Today is March 16th. So it gives us 43 drafts. I probably could have shrunk it down a little more if I really wanted to, but I figured 2 weeks was decent. But that just shows you drafts are flying right now. But the first 5 closers, relief pitchers, I should say, off the board. Liam Hendrix at pick 55. Josh Hader at pick 60. Aroldis Chapman at 65.5. You have Edwin Diaz at 70 and Rafael Iglesias about 79. So from 55 to 79, you have 5 closers off the board. I kind of kept them together because for me personally, you can be different, obviously. This is kind of like the tier. If I'm trying to get a big guy, I want one of these 5. Otherwise, it's a different ball game. So how do you view these 5 if you're going into a draft, and like how aggressive would you be towards them type thing?
Yeah, I mean, I'll put aside my own personal biases against drafting relievers this high in drafts.
Real quick, I'll be honest, putting the outline together, I know Toby's strategy, so I'm sitting there going, okay, how can I do this where we cover all the bases, but don't just go, nope, we're just talking about the last 12 guys.
Totally. And I have a lot of thoughts, too. I have a lot of thoughts about a lot of the situations. But, no, I mean, I think Liam Hendrix for me is top. He's got to be the best guy. He's just been lights out the last 2 years, really. I mean, whatever you call last year and the year before that. I mean, just incredible from a skills perspective there. And he goes into a great situation, not only with the team, but I think also with just the context in terms of the division he's playing in and the opportunity he'll have for saves. So I just think he, for me, is kind of head and shoulders above everybody. Hader, I have a little bit of issue with Hader. just because the Brewers, the way they've utilized him is just a little bizarre. I mean, like last year, they had such weird utilization of him, and saves are so key, but he's been dominant too, so I understand it. He has gotten a little bit worse, I think, with each progressive year. There are some home run issues, concerns there. I don't think he's pitched great this spring, which isn't necessarily something to hold against him, but you'd obviously prefer that he looked good in spring so far. So again, not a guy that I'm really that interested in where he's going, and I think the value that he provides. Chapman, I think, would probably be my number 2, just because he's been so solid. He's never really been bad. He's always been elite. The innings are lower, but the saves are still there, and that's really what you're buying when you draft a guy this high. Is you want those saves. You want those 30 saves. There's 30 plus saves, because in for instance, like a main event, 80th percentile is 73 saves. So if you get your 130 save guy, you can piece together 43 saves from other players. And so I think that that's really important to factor into the equation. So I really like Chapman, and obviously the skills. The velo was down last year, but I'm not as concerned because the skills were, again, they actually took a jump forward last year. I think he started using his splitter a little bit more, if my memory is serving me correctly, and just, I think, better. Diaz, obviously a wild card, but the skills are off the charts again. I mean, all the guys we're talking about are like, their swinging strike rates are somewhere like between 17 and 22% or something like that. Just absolutely bonkers, skill wise. The contact that he gives up is always a concern. The inconsistency is a concern. Again, when you're spending a pick, a top probably 60 pick when all is said and done, when we get into the big drafts later this month, that inconsistency worries me, right? The fact that in the past when he struggled, the Mets haven't given him, that long of a leash, concerns me a little bit. So I think of this group, Hader and Diaz are kind of my avoids, recognizing that the ceiling is absolutely massive for both of them. And then Iglesias, I really like as well. I think he's interesting as a closer just because he brings, 3-4 pitches that he throws a decent amount. He was really good last year. He actually improved. He's been improving, despite some, I think, rumblings that maybe he was starting to fade. He's going to be really good. I think the Angels situation is a great situation as well. The ballpark's fine. I think the Angels will win plenty of games. I think the AL West is a nice place to pitch. Just generally speaking, I mean, the A's are taking a step back. The Mariners are rebuilding, although I think, they're going to be okay. The Rangers are going to be god awful offensively. I mean, talk about a team you're going to want to stream against, I think. So anyways, that has nothing to do with Iglesias necessarily, except for the fact that I think he'll get plenty of saves. And I also think that he's a highly skilled guy. And that's really what you're asking for when you draft a guy here, right? And one of my arguments against it, as we've seen the last couple years, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's always the case, right? They have been reliable in the past sometimes, is just that, like, when you're drafting the guys this high with a 65 inning sample, anything is possible regardless of the skills. We saw that with Diaz, where he happened to give up a bunch of home runs, and he happened to have a lot of guys on base when he gave up those home runs. And so, he really hurt you a couple years ago. That can happen at any point in time, a couple rough outings, and it's hard to make up for it. So that's my general, thing against closers, in addition to just not thinking that I can get something relatively similar way back there, where I don't feel as confident about getting a top 60 player, when I'm drafting them at pick 200 or whatever it is. So that's kind of how I would order them, I guess. Hendrix, Chapman, Iglesias, probably. I wouldn't go after Hader or Diaz, but again, I understand why people would be interested in them.
Yeah, I'm with you on Hendrix. Hendrix is my number 1 as well. And he's been great the last 2 years, like you mentioned, going to a better environment potentially for more saves with the White Sox than in Oakland, if you just think about the division as a whole and how good that White Sox team should be this year. So I'm a huge Hendrix fan in that scenario at number 1. I'm glad to see NFBC, the ADPs have shifted, because it was for a long time their Hader was still number 1. But that's slowly moving along here. I have Hader at number 2, but I'm pretty much not drafting him anywhere. I have him number 2 because if he is the closer, he's probably better than Hendrix. But I have concerns about, how the Brewers use him, because they could use him in high leverage spots, leading to more Devin Williams saves, because they have the luxury of having 2 great back-end bullpen guys. Not saying that Hader's not going to get a handful of saves. He's going to probably get 20, 25 saves if he closes the whole year, maybe more. but there's still that question to be had there. And if you're taking an early pick on him, I want the guy like a Hendrix locked into that job. So Hader's good, really good. He can also be traded. So that's something to keep in mind as well. Probably traded to be a closer, but could be traded. So there's a couple slight concerns with Hader. If I have to grasp at straws, that's where I'm grasping. Chapman, I have at number 3 with me on my list as well. I love what he does, and people say, well, if you think Hader is going to lose spots, well, we know Chapman, the Yankees are smart enough, and they do rest him from time to time. But when you win 100 baseball games a year, you can do that with your closer and still get 35-plus saves. That's the beauty of Aroldis Chapman. And when he's out there, he's striking out the world. So they rest him because he can still throw 100 when he goes back out there. That's what the Yankees do because it's a luxury that they have. So, yeah, Chapman, very big fan of it. You said Diaz is my number 6 personally on my list, so I'd have him 5 on this list. He's good. He's a wild card. You hit it on the head. That's a good way to phrase him because we've seen him be really good. We've seen the blow-ups. And the Mets have a lot of backups in case things go wrong there. And Rojas, the manager, has already kind of been wishy-washy about Diaz whenever he's asked about that situation. He's calling him the closer, but not with a lot of confidence, it sounds like. So just keep that in mind. And Iglesias I have in a lot of places. I am a huge Raisel fan. He doesn't get the love he deserves, and he had 1 bad year in Cincinnati with an ERA over 4. He had 4 of the years with an ERA under 3. He strikes out the world. He has the 4 pitches, like you mentioned. He's a very, very good reliever, and he's one of those closers that can give you more than 1 inning. So if you're in an innings pitched league, if you're just looking for more stats to rack up, Iglesias can help you with that. So he's a very, very good closer that I have ranked number 4 on my list. Be 3, I guess, on this list technically. Excuse me.
Bless you.
Thank you. And so I'm a big Raisel fan, and basically, like Toby was hinting at, if you're looking for the overall 75 saves or whatever, that's why I try to get one of these guys if I can, and usually it's Raisel. I just kind of have we've had questions in the past, like when do you jump to get a player? Well, I have these 4 or 5 guys on my list. Like Rosenthal's my 5, so I have those 5 guys. And as they start to get drafted, and it's coming back to my turn, I'm going to take one of them more often than not. Not every time, but more often than not, I'm going to take one of them and then know, okay, I can wait until the Kimbrels or someone else down the list we'll talk about later to kind of give me my number 2, and then I can punt later. That's my strategy. Everyone's different. That kind of helps me sleep at night when I do this. So Hendrix, Chapman, Iglesias, Hader, Diaz for me, but definitely a bunch of really good closers, and that's obviously why they are ranked where they are ranked. All right, the next grouping we have here, I skipped James Karinchak because we'll get to him later. Don't you worry about that. Ryan Presley.
Chuck,
he's chucking it up.
Whatever.
Ryan Presley at pick 93 and Trevor Rosenthal at 97. Honestly, I thought Rosenthal would move faster. I don't know if it was the groin injury that concerned people. He's going to be throwing again here. He already threw off flat ground. He's supposed to be in a game the next day or two. Get some game action, so he looks to be okay. But you got Presley with Houston, looked really good when he had the chance. You got Rosenthal moving to Oakland. How do you look at these two, Toby?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're both solid options for sure. With Presley, he's always been good, right, as a reliever ever since he's developed that curveball. Very good pitcher, should do very well with the Astros. I mean, that's one of the primo spots because I think they're going to be a really good team, generally speaking. Great ballpark to pitch in. So I think he's an excellent option. I also like Rosenthal as well. I worry a little bit. I know his control was better last year, and he was obviously lights out, but there's an injury history there. There are control issues there, but Oakland is a phenomenal place to pitch. I mean, just have all my pitchers in Oakland, please, just for the love of whatever. And just great defense behind him. So I think they're both really good options. And so I don't really have any problems with taking them. Again, I just so people understand, I always have problems with people taking closers at this point in the draft. I always have problems with it. So with all that being said, these are guys that I think are good options for where they're going. He hasn't thrown yet in spring training, but it seems like it's a minor issue. The key is that he's going to be the closer. They've got no reason not to put him in that place. That's what they paid him for. And he's going to be really good if he pitches, probably, unless he walks a lot of people and just gets injured.
Yep, it's very, very possible.
Risks you take.
Risk you take, most definitely. Yeah, Presley, the guy's really, really good. K rate over 30% for 3 straight years now. The ratios last year 3.43, but like 2.5 and below the previous 2 years. Doesn't walk a ton. He had a little bit, like last year, he had a little more walk issue. I think it's helped lead to his ERA situation, but almost a 50% ground ball guy year after year. Just a really, really good reliever. So he's definitely in play. The Astros will be very good. The only concern I have there is, like, until about 2 or 3 weeks ago, I think it was, until Rosenthal basically signed with Oakland, the Astros were looking for a closer still. So I'm just curious, like Presley's the guy right now, but does that mean they don't trade for someone if they're still in it? Something to keep in mind. He's very, very good. Run with it while you can if you want. I have Rosenthal as my number 5, mainly because the Oakland factor. I believe he's very good as well. Don't get me wrong, but Oakland, year after year, you have Hendrix. You've had other guys close there, and they just put up 30-plus saves year after year. It's like a saves factory. A lot of it's the ballpark they pitch in. A lot of it's just that team. It seems like if you're a West Coast person, you watch a lot of late-night A's games, not a lot of blowouts. That's just the way I'll say it. There might be a lot of runs scored, but they're always tight games, it feels like, in Oakland. So they get a lot of save opportunities, and Rosenthal is going to get his fair share. So I'm pretty pumped on that. I don't have a ton of shares of Rosenthal because people are taking him earlier than I would, but I do like him quite a bit if you feel like pulling the trigger on that one.
And one thing to mention on Presley, because you mentioned the walk rate, I think one thing that's good to do in these smaller sample seasons, to kind of double check that is, he had a higher walks per 9, but his walk rate was about where it's been throughout his career. Yeah, if you look at his first pitch strike rate, highest of his career. His zone percentage went down slightly, but his O swing was still an elite 40%. So when you combine those together, it seems like he should be like in line for where he is. The walks per 9 is a little bit higher because he had such a high BABIP. So he was giving up a lot of runners. And so just something like, I think that's important for people. Like that's a good check to put in place. Like when you see a guy's walk rate has increased, is just to check the underlying numbers in that small sample size to make sure that, that it appears to be an earned increase, so not like a comment on what you were saying, but just something that I was kind of running through that in my head. That's like a check that I do just to make sure that it makes sense. And even early season, that's a really good thing to do, just to make sure that, guys, what is skill and what is just a small sample or bad luck that's happening to a guy.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Good point on that. The next one we have is a 3-pack. We have Brad Hand at pick 103. We have Kenley Jansen at 105 and Kirby Yates at 118. He's a little bit farther back, but I figure he's been actually on the move up here of late. So he's not quite where they are.
Kirby's on the move.
Kirby is on the move. Like the old, was it Kirby Dreamland, the pink ghost? That's a whole other thing. I don't know. But
I don't know.
But yeah, Brad Hand, Jansen, Yates. How do you look at these 3?
Well, we all know that Brad Hand sucks, right? I mean, I'm just kidding. I mean, for Brad Hand, he's funny because he kind of falls in this category for me of diminishing skills, but he's never been bad. Yep. You know what I'm saying? Like, even though his velo continues to fall down, and even though like everything is like, how is this guy still good? He still manages to be good. And so maybe that's the special sauce. Maybe it's the Alex Colomé sauce, Maybe it's the Brandon Kinsler sauce. Maybe it's the sauce that just allows somebody to keep a good ERA, a good whip, and just get saves. So that's kind of how I feel about Brad Hand. If he falls, he's actually somebody that I don't mind going after because I think the Nats are going to win plenty of games. I think he'll have a long leash in that closer role, and that's kind of what I'm looking for. So I don't think he'll fall here because I think closers are going to push up. But if he falls into it's probably a lie. But if he falls into the 120, 130 range, instead of higher up, maybe I'd consider going after him. Jansen, I think, is really, really interesting because I think the Dodgers have no reason to take him out of the closer role. I mean, what's the purpose, right? He's got the big contract. He's pitched really well in the regular season. We saw that in the postseason, they're not afraid to go away from them. They're going to be really good unless he's just absolutely god awful. Then you don't worry about it. But last year he was actually very good in the regular season. Just from a skills perspective, I'm pulling it up right here. So just give my computer a second.
Better strikeout rate than 2019.
Totally. 32.4% K rate.
Yep.
8.8% walk rate, but, it doesn't really look like it should have been that high, honestly. But still, 24% K minus walk rate, 15% swinging strike rate. The guy is really good. And he had a great whip. He had a low ERA. He had a bunch of Ks. He had a bunch of saves. What do you want from the guy? And he's always leads the league in terms of like his StatCast metrics given up from a quality of contact perspective. So why not get Kenley? Just load up on Kenley in this situation. What did you say his ADP was?
It's ADP of 105.
105. See, I probably won't take him, but if I was considering taking a closer in this area, Kenley Jansen for me would be a great pick because I just think I think he's going to be fine. Think about him versus like a Kirby Yates coming off of a season missed by injury in his arm. He's older. He's had one dominant season, I think, right? He had one. Yeah, he had one dominant
one really,
season.
really good season. Yeah.
His velo's slightly down this spring. He's on a 1-year contract. It's not for that much money. They've got a bunch of good arms in that bullpen with Romano and Dolis, and for me, I'm not really interested in Yates. I don't see the huge difference between Yates, where he's at right here, versus some of the guys going a little bit later. It's just, yes, he's got the opportunity, so it's fine. But I just think, there's other guys that I'd rather go to.
Yeah, I like it. You preached Kenley Jansen. I'm glad someone else is agreeing because there seems like there's a lot of negativity on Kenley Jansen these days. And I don't get it. I think they're remembering the playoffs, which is rough. I get it. Nick Solac just hit a grand slam, by the way. Just throwing another opposite
Nick
field.
Solak's ADP just jumped 45 spots. He's going in the top 100 now, folks. Better jump on that.
But
career year
coming up.
Man, he's
position
like Vlad Guerrero Jr. Just move him up. Ladies and gentlemen, 4 RBIs for Nick Solac today. He was batting against some guy who's not even pitching in the majors.
Wandy Peralta, he'll be in the bullpen.
What? You're going to count it as a home run if it was hit against Wandy Peralta? I thought you took away at least 2 bases on home run. Doesn't that count as a double in MLB?
In San Francisco, it would have been a double because there's no way it goes opposite field out there. So yeah.
Oh man.
But
all right, Bubba, it's check time. It's check time here. Kuzma scored 8 points in the final 2 minutes of the quarter, giving me hope, pumping me full of hope. We need a huge second half, ladies and gentlemen. I'm bringing you along on my DFS NBA ride. Let me tell you something here. All right, go ahead.
Back to Kenley Jansen. You mentioned the strikeout rates and all that. If people want to dig deeper, it was the lowest max exit velocity he's given up in his career, the lowest barrel rate he's given up in his career. His O swings and his contact rates are very similar to the last couple seasons. He was still very, very good. People just want to clown on him because he had a rough postseason and he didn't look as dominant during the regular season, but he was outstanding. So I'm all aboard Kenley Jansen because I don't know about you, Toby, but I think the Dodgers are still going to win a lot of baseball games this year. So I think they're going to be just fine. Kind of like the thoughts I had with Chapman. Yeah, the Dodgers have a lot of options. They can rest Kenley if they want. He's still going to run into 30-something saves. It's pretty outstanding what he can do out there. So I'm all aboard the Kenley Jansen train. I don't mind Brad Hand either. I'm just, if I'm going to pay the price, I'll save a little bit and get Jansen. And given they're going right next to each other now, but for a while it was spread out a little more. I still believe a little bit in Tanner Rainey, but if Hand's getting the job done, they're going to keep him back there. That's why they paid him to come in there. And I had shares of him last year, and I was scared every time, and he got the job done. He's one of those pitchers that can just pitch without nasty stuff. He just gets it done. So more power to him, I guess. It's just scary. And Kirby Yates is intriguing just because he's healthy. He's throwing well so far this spring, like velocity-wise and everything. But there's always that concern, like you said, he missed a whole season by injury. So what's going on here? But if you want to take a risk, I think he'll be fine. Just not a guy I'm probably running to go take. But kind of after this grouping, it drops off a pretty good amount. So I can see why people might be moving Kirby Yates up because there's a lot more question marks after the Yates and company here.
You know what I've learned, Bubba?
Yes.
With regard to Kenley Jansen?
Mm-hmm. Haters
going to hate. You know what I'm saying?
Haters are going to hate.
I mean, look at me. I'm presented with all this visual evidence that Vlad Guerrero Jr. is going to be really, really good this year. And yet, what do? I still hate, right? I still hate.
Well,
not like actually hate, but
the reason why haters are going to hate is going to be spelled with a D, because the Dodgers are going to trade for Josh Hader. That's been like the rumor the whole time. So you can see it now. Haters going to hate. It's just how it's going to go.
I mean, the thing is, the Dodgers are a smart organization. They're not going to trade a bunch of prospects and good players.
Not mine, by the way.
It came out of whose mouth?
Toby's mouth, not mine, by the way.
What's that?
The Dodgers comment you just made
about being a smart organization. I mean, they're not going to trade a bunch of prospects for a relief pitcher, right?
No, they're not.
That they could just trade for David Bednar, on the Pirates, and you're essentially getting Josh Hader Jr.
That's
So,
hey, you never know. What they'll do is they'll trade for Hader and like Christian Yelich.
Yeah,
that's what they'll do because they're the Dodgers. Yeah, we'll take on the contracts. Then you can have 4 of our prospects after that. That's fine.
Kudos to them though for spending.
They're spending a lot too. So yeah, good for them. They better win, or otherwise it's pretty embarrassing.
Winner's gonna win.
No, they won once. They lost more than that. So, Alex Coleman, pick 157. Rafael Montero at 164. Now, I know you've already mentioned Coleman as he's a guy that just gets it done, but he doesn't have the greatest stuff kind of comment, which a lot of people say. And I usually ride his coattails all the time. A little different story this year. And then you have Rafael Montero, who everyone's in love with because it's his job. But we got to remember, it's Rafael Montero. And B, if he's any good, Seattle will trade him. So keep that in mind. So what are you doing with these two guys? Because I don't have shares of either one of them right now.
Speaking of haters going to hate, I mean, Alex Coleman, what does he have to do, fantasy owners,
I agree,
for you to embrace the man as a closer extraordinaire? He's got the special sauce. He knows how to get saves. He knows how to close out games. He's like a Mark Melancon senior. He's even better than Mark Melancon. It doesn't matter how he pitches. He just ends up getting saves. It's remarkable. And keeping the ERA low and the whip low. No, I mean, I think Coleman's fine. I don't know. I think the thing with the Twins is they're going to mish and mash. And so for that reason, I don't have a ton of interest in this place. But I do think he's a guy that if he falls a little bit, then, and by falls a little bit, I mean, if he falls to like pick 180 or something like that, like I might, want to grab him there. But yeah, I mean, I think he's going to be fine. His velo, I think, is started out a little low. I think it's increased as he's thrown in spring training. I think he's pitched well in his last couple outings, although I could be making that up. But I think he's going to be fine. They got him to close out some games, and then I think they'll have a little bit of a mix and match. I do think one thing about the Minnesota bullpen, before we forget, is just I think Tyler Duffy is a guy to be really worried about. His velo is way down this spring. He's been getting absolutely destroyed. And with Hansel Robles, I think he's struggled a little bit too. But, with him in that bullpen now, with Coleman in that bullpen, with Tyler Rogers already, Taylor. Oh, Jesus. Can we get some people whose last name is Rogers? That name doesn't start like with T and have 5 letters?
Yeah,
or 6 letters?
Tyler is in San Francisco.
Tyler, Taylor, and Trevor? Like, what is this?
Yes. Yep.
Oh my God.
Two are lefties.
Talk about something where you should hate on them for. Like, if you are giving birth right now, and your last name is Rogers, please, and you have, please just don't name your kid Tyler, Trevor.
No T's.
Taylor.
No T's.
Tim. Whatever it is, yeah, another name. But honestly, I think that I'm really worried about Duffy. I know a lot of people thought he might get some speculative saves there in that mix, but he's looked really bad. But I think Coleman's fine. Probably not a 30 save guy, but 20 saves, something like that, with 3.5 ERA and a 1.25 WHIP and strikeout an inning. Which, hey, I'll take it.
Mm-hmm. What about Montero?
Oh, Montero. God, he's awful. Like, why are people drafting Montero where they're drafting him?
I have no idea. I can't.
I mean, okay, let's do a little dive in on Montero. And I think I was trashing him before, and his CSW is good and stuff like that. Which, whatever, I'll decide when I want to use CSW and when I don't want to use it as a stat. All right, people, come on. That's what Alex Fast's article said, right?
Yep, exactly. Only when
it's
choose
when you use this. So Montero, swinging strike rate, under 10%, 9.3% last year. I have a rule against drafting closers that have swinging strike rates under 10% unless their names are Brandon Kinsler or Mark Melancon. All right. Rule number one of drafting closers. No, honestly, I mean, he had a super low BABIP last year, although he also had a low strand rate. You know, I think he got hit real hard too. Not that I pay a ton of attention to that, but yeah, barrel rates the last 2 years of 15.2% and 13.9%. So I just don't think he's a good pitcher. And he's also had, you know, injury concerns in a couple of the last 2 seasons. He's missed time for injury, which, you know, shouldn't factor a bunch, but certainly factors in when you're being drafted where he's drafting. So I don't understand the love for Montero. I don't think he's very good. I would not draft him at all.
I would not draft him at all. Yeah, no, I have no shares of him either. Like, he's a massive fly ball guy, something I don't want to deal with either, given Seattle's nice and all, but that division, some of the guys are going to have to face up against. No, I'll pass on him. But Coleman, I've always been a fan of. Where he's going kind of stinks because Rogers actually went after him, and Rogers to me is the primary closer. But you know, Baldelli, he likes to use Rogers for multiple innings in a high leverage spot. So Coleman, like you said, is going to get a fair share of saves when he gets the chance. So that's an option. I don't completely hate it. It's just where he's going. I feel like you can get the same production or gamble the same way a little later in the draft, and that's where I'd rather be taking those kind of stabs. And then at that point in time on Coleman, that's the problem. And yes, Montero, I want nothing to do with at all.
And one thing that I would say about Montero too, if you look at his pitch mix, I mean, last year the best pitch he had a 13.3% swinging strike rate. Like, the best pitch he had last year had a 13.3% strike rate. That's not the good. Best pitch
not good
he had a 13.3% swinging strike rate.
I'm not going to say it again. You know who had an overall swinging strike rate of 15% last year? Jansen.
Jansen.
Keep hating on that.
Keep hating.
Yep, haters gonna hate. But Alex Coleman is at pick 158. His teammate, like I just said, Taylor Rogers, 186, almost 30 picks later, 2 rounds later in 15-team drafts. And you got Matt Barnes at pick 187. So they're a pick apart. You have Taylor Rogers in a potential platoon on a good Twins team, and you have Matt Barnes, who will make you go crazy if you roster him as a closer. So what do you see in these two?
Yeah, for Rogers, I'm a fade on Rogers. I mean, the thing is, anytime you have a guy who's not supposed to get the bulk of the saves and you have to draft him at this point in the draft, why are you doing that? You know, like, why are you, unless you get clearance that he's going to get the bulk of the saves, I think you can't draft him at this spot. Like, there's just too many other options. And the same goes with Barnes. Like, Barnes has pitched really well. He looked good at the end of last year, although some of the underlying metrics, when I took another look, were not as hot. Like, it seemed like they were a little bit luck driven. But at the same time, like, do we know that he's going to be the closer over Ottavino? Like, do we know that he's got 100% of the saves? We don't really know that. Like, we think that. But also, Alex Cora also gave Ryan Brazier the closing job over Matt Barnes 2 years ago. And Ryan Brazier was actually pretty good at the end of last year. I haven't been looking how he's been doing in spring training. But you know, like, it's just one of those things where I don't see the point of drafting a guy who may not be the closer at this point in time without that certainty.
Yep. No, we're pretty much on the same page. Rogers, I will take a chance on where he's going because I've seen him fall past like 200. He's one of those guys where you might have someone in the draft that really likes him and he goes, or he falls and people just don't want to deal with him because you look at, he's gone as high as, over the last 2 weeks, as high as 128. Remember, his ADP is 187. As high as 128. As low as 320. Mm-hmm. So this is one of those guys that he falls around. So I can't remember what league I was drafted him. I grabbed him recently as my third closer, and I'm like, okay, I can live with that. That's doable. But just know he's gonna take days off. Coleman's gonna get his fair share. Like, if Rogers gets 22 to 25 saves, give or take 20 to 25 saves, I think that's what you should be shooting for. Like, if he gets that, you're happy. If you think he's gonna get more than that, you're really wishing on a prayer because I just don't see Coleman is going to get probably 20-ish as well. Like, that's just how it's going to go. They're going to it's almost 50-50 to me. Rogers might throw more innings. Like I said, he'll throw a couple innings here and there. He'll have higher leverage situations, but Coleman is going to get his. That's why he's going higher, and I think for good reasons. But Rogers is interesting. Also, Rogers kind of stumbled towards the end of last year and lost his job just to clear his mind. But he's back there. I wouldn't worry too much about that. And Barnes, yes, I think Ottavino is going to take that job. If not right away, at least at some point. If Ottavino figures it out, like the way he was pitching in Colorado and early in New York, he is better than Matt Barnes. So that's going to be one to definitely watch. And how good are the Red Sox really going to be? Just think about that one as well.
I think you should open and set it with Metallica, "Living on a Prayer." Wouldn't that be
the closers episode?
Wouldn't that be a great intro to the closer song? Maybe I'll do that. I think I can slip in Spotify songs into my into the podcast.
Be much easier for you to do.
I gotta make a little note.
There you go.
Of doing that.
All right, a couple team situations to hit on real quick. We got the Reds. Amir Garrett, he's battling forearm stiffness. A report came out 2 days ago. He plans on throwing early next week. Keep an eye on that. Lucas Sims, he was battling an elbow deal, but he's been throwing bullpens. He looks like he'll be fine by opening day. They have Sean Doolittle. TJ Antone, I think he's going to be in the rotation, so I don't think he's even an option really. There's a lot going on there in Cincinnati. Eugenio Suarez playing shortstop, all kinds of fun stuff. But how are you approaching this? Because right now, I'm kind of grabbing Lucas Sims shares because he's going so late right now, so late that I'm going to take that gamble. What are you doing with the situation?
I think that's the way to handle it. I mean, I think the thing is there's so many really good arms they have in the bullpen. I mean, you didn't even mention Jose De Leon or Jeff Hoffman, right? And I don't know if De Leon, right, they probably don't throw him straight into the fire.
I'm saving De Leon for a listener question coming up.
Okay, cool. But Jeff Hoffman is a guy that I really love, who I think, you say TJ Anton's going to go into the rotation. I actually wouldn't be surprised if Anton ended up in the bullpen and Jeff Hoffman ended up in the rotation. Just the way that they're kind of stretching them out and kind of previous histories of usage. And Anton is not efficient with his pitches. He has a pretty high walk rate, but again, absolutely great skills,
Mm-hmm.
But so there's just all those guys. The one guy that I wouldn't really be targeting is Sean Doolittle. I mean, I love Sean Doolittle, the person, and I love Sean Doolittle, the pitcher, but I don't think he's gone. He's just getting destroyed out there right now. And his velo was up a little bit today. It sounded like that he was sitting 94, which is really good news. But I don't trust it, right? And the Reds have got to see. They've got to see him actually be able to get some guys out and not give up home runs. I think he's given up 4 home runs already in spring training. I think he gave up 3 in 1 inning, or 2 in 1 inning a couple of days ago. So that's the one guy that I'm kind of avoiding. I love your strategy of just kind of going after Sims or going after the cheaper arms that maybe their chance of being the closer is only 10%, is only 15%, is only 25%. But if you hit it, it's a gold mine, right? Where you're drafting them.
And right now, over the last 2 weeks, Garrett's still going around pick 210, where Lucas Sims going to pick 350. I'll take that 140 picks and take my chances. That's just if you drop him, you drop him at 350. It's not going to crush you. But the upside of Sims, he's a very, very good pitcher. That if he's healthy, he can run away with some of this stuff. In reality, if Sims were healthy, I could see him having a similar, if not better, year than Alex Coleman. And that's, I think, because for sure, I think him and Garrett, if both healthy, they still kind of split it almost like Rogers and Coleman do for the most part. So Sims, I think people are really worried about the injury, and I get it. Elbows, you don't want to hear that. But if you've been watching the beat reporters and his rehab and stuff, I'm not as scared. And at 350, I don't care if I'll just drop him. So it's not a big deal.
Totally.
All right. Tampa Bay Rays. Just thought we'd talk about it because it's always the conundrum. That is the Rays. I think we said on last episode with the relievers, I think 6, if you count the playoffs, 8 different guys got saves last year, and not to mention shortened season. So that's fun. That's fun to deal with. They have Nick Anderson, who's an outstanding reliever, but he might be high leverage at times. You have Pete Fairbanks, who didn't get a save all season, but got 2 in the postseason plus 2 holds. So he was in high leverage spots and important spots. You have Diego Castillo, who was outstanding. Shane, those are the 3 main guys. But you have Shane McClanahan, who's been fierce stuff late last year, but even in the spring so far. It's crazy what they have in that bullpen. You could probably just say don't draft Rays closers, But if you are approaching a situation, how do you approach this bullpen?
Don't draft Rays closers.
Yeah.
That's pretty much how I'm going to approach it. I mean, It's just like, yes, drafting Nick Anderson, I think he's a very good pitcher, and he's going to get some saves. I mean, he got 6 last year, so maybe he gets 10 to 15 saves, which would be terrific with the ratios and stuff like that he provides. But again, you fall into the same situation where you have small sample size. You're paying up a high draft cost for a guy who's not going to get access to the bulk of the saves. So he's not going to be your 30 save guy. And so I just don't think it works. I don't think it makes sense to draft him. Although, although I won't be critical of people for drafting him, because that means that there's one other player that I want to draft in that place that he goes. But no, he could be totally fine. I just don't think you draft him. I don't think they're going to have a closer. I think they've shown pretty clearly that that's not necessarily how they operate. So you could take a spec on like a Diego Castillo who's going very late in drafts just to see if that's who ends up being the guy, or a Fairbanks just to see if he ends up being that guy. But again, I mean, like, they were given saves to, how many players? 14 guys or 8 guys had saves?
I want to say if you combine the postseason, it was like 8 guys last year.
Let's say a team gets 45 save opportunities in a season or something like that. I mean, you divide that by 8. That's like 5.5 saves per guy, right? So it just doesn't make sense. And they got guys coming out of nowhere, right? They have McClanahan, who looks incredibly good. They have Springs. They still have Kittredge. They have like Thompson. They have all these guys, all these arms who are phenomenal. And they have no reason not to play the leverage game and just put guys in the best spot. And that's a boon to Nick Anderson when it happens to roll around that, the best pitchers are in the 9th, best hitters are in the 9th, but it's just not worth it for me.
Yeah, it's tough. Nick Anderson, I just won't draft, and it's not because he's not a good pitcher, like you said. It's just the situation's tough. He's basically a glorified Devin Williams at that point, because he'll get some saves, but he's not like guaranteed to be the guy. For me, it's like Diego Castillo's at 280, Pete Fairbanks is 350. I've been drafting Pete Fairbanks late just because I think the way they use him in the postseason, I lean that direction, but they use Castillo a ton too. It's an embarrassment of riches they have. So if you're going to take one late, maybe you run into like 12 saves from Pete Fairbanks. I don't know. It's just, you're going to do it where do I use him this week or not? And the weeks you don't use him, so he's got like 3 saves just because that's the Rays. So
totally.
And that, have fun there.
Like you mentioned, just hit that strategy. And I'm seeing people use it a lot more in drafts this year, like in TGFBI and stuff, where you're just kind of putting those high ROI. I don't know if ROI is the right, but high ROI relievers that are easy drops first week of the season if they're not in that role, right? Like, it gives you roster flexibility, and then you also have the chance of hitting on some of those guys. So I fully support you in that strategy there.
Let me give me 2 seconds. I'm going to pull up Jeff Erickson because he beat Jeff Erickson 2 last night. It's a 12-team online championship, and he tweeted out his whole pick deal. But I wanted to mention it because his last handful of picks here, and I commented and talked to him for a couple tweets about it. But okay, here we are. He got Chris Martin in round 24, which I don't mind that at all.
No.
But then round 26, Hector Neris, round 28, Pete Fairbanks, round 29, Gregory Soto. So he's like his 3 of his last 4 picks. I'm like, I'm just gonna go take guys and hope that works. And I mentioned, he's like, yeah, it's that time of the year where it's weird, and if it doesn't work, I drop him early because I'm gonna use the waiver wire. So that's the idea, to see what sticks, because you never know. But there's a lot of interesting situations, like in Philadelphia. You have Archie Bradley, who they just paid money to come in there. You have Hector Neris, who was the closer last year. You have Jose Alvarado, that before Bradley was signed, I was kind of pumped about that because I liked Alvarado in Tampa, so it made the 4-headed monster in Tampa 3-headed, but now made an issue in Philly. It's crowded. The more I think about it, and the more I listen to some beat writers and stuff, I feel like it's actually Archie Bradley's job, and that makes me a-okay kind of trying to draft him, but still not happy about it. How do you approach the Philly situation with these 3 guys?
Okay, rule 1B of drafting closers. All right, Archie Bradley sucks too. All right. How many years have we been drafting Archie Bradley to get us saves? And how many years has he come through? He's come through for half a season, people.
Blame the Diamondbacks.
Half a season.
Blame the Diamondbacks.
Honestly, I mean, I think it's Archie Bradley's job heading into camp. But I think if you look at how Bradley has pitched, his velo is down considerably. I think 1.5 to 2 miles per hour so far in this spring. So maybe that gets back up. But he's not really, it's this typical Archie Bradley stuff. Like, he doesn't strike guys out, like an elite closer does. And if you look at what Neris is doing, I think Neris has a higher ERA at this point in spring, but he's also striking out 2 or 3 guys every time he's out there. And I think when all is said and done, I think it's going to end up being Neris. I don't know if that will be at the beginning of the season or in the middle of the season or whatnot, but I like Neris more. That doesn't mean that you should draft Neris, because I do think that they want Archie Bradley to win the job, but he's not doing that right now. And I don't think he looks great so far. So that's kind of my general idea. I don't think Alvarado is in the save situation. I'm not sure how many lefties they have in that bullpen. But I don't think he's a closer really. Although I do think he could be nasty since he's throwing like whatever it is, 99 on average out of the bullpen. So that's kind of my general thoughts on that situation.
He's looked very nasty this spring, Alvarado. That is that's why I was so mad that they wouldn't sign Bradley, because I could have confidence in him maybe taking out Neris. Again, they don't have a lot of lefties though, so that might change that. I think if you're in a saves and hold leagues, I think Alvarado's a phenomenal pick because you can get him super late or free basically. So that's a guy I would look at. But actually, look at a lot of lefties. We can talk about that later on a listener question. But Neris, I was drafting everywhere until I kept hearing things, and I don't disagree with what you were saying. Neris just has a walk problem in the past. If he can figure that out, he's definitely better than Archie Bradley. Like Archie Bradley, he's an okay ground ball guy, not last year, but throughout most of his career. Strike rate 24% last year, walk rate below 2%, best of his career last year. The ratios have been okay. It's just like he's picked 222, and I'm thinking, okay, I can take the gamble at 222. It's a tough one. I'd rather have Neris if I knew Neris had the job, but I really think it's Archie Bradley's job right now, and he is going to have to screw up because they gave him a multi-year deal. That's the concern I have. They paid him multiple seasons to potentially be their closer. That's right.
They signed Archie Bradley to a multi-year deal.
I'm 99% sure it's multi-year. Let me scroll up here. Oh no, it's only a 1-year deal.
I was going to say.
I thought it was 2 years for some reason.
I was going to say, take away that GM.
No, okay,
GM's
1 year.
Job there.
I apologize.
No, that's all right.
For some reason I thought it was a 2-year deal. Okay, that's not 1 year, $6 million. I think you're rid of him. Never mind. But I still think it's his job. I still do, and that scares me.
I know. I don't disagree. I just think Neris is going to end up being the better reliever this year.
Yeah, I see. I don't disagree. That's why the situation in Philly is crappy. it's just bad. But let's go to Baltimore. This one, Hunter Harvey. At least he made it easier for people like myself. I gave up on him this year already, which was nice. It felt good. But I'd never liked seeing the guy get hurt. I kind of wish he didn't now because I'm not drafting him and other people are. But Hunter Harvey got placed on a 60-day IL today for his oblique situation. So it's a pretty bad one if he's going on the 60-day IL. And that moves up Tanner Scott, who's probably the favorite, but you got Cesar Valdez there, guys we've talked about before. I have a lot of Tanner Scott shares. I have a lot of both of these guys in best ball and draft champions leagues. I'm drafting Tanner Scott where I can right now. Let me get you their ADPs right now before I give you the floor. Tanner Scott, ADP of 348, is going as high as 269 over the last 2 weeks. And Valdez, not Framber, he doesn't count anymore. Cesar Valdez, 360 as high as 330. So they're starting to get he's only gone in 4 drafts, so it's obviously happened since the Hunter Harvey news on that one. Let me see how many drafts Scott's gone in. Tanner Scott has gone in 17. I mean, there's 43 drafts on this ADP. So Tanner Scott, Cesar Valdez, how are you approaching those guys? Or do you have a sleeper in Baltimore?
No sleepers in Baltimore. I think Tanner Scott is the much better pitcher, so I would draft him. But I also don't think that they're going to use one particular closer. I think they're going to mix it around. They'll probably get like 7 saves all season, I think. And so maybe Tanner Scott will get 5 and Valdez will get 2. But I do really like Scott. I mean, I think it's his slider, which is just one of the best pitches in baseball. Super high swinging strike rate. And I'm right on that, right? I'm not making that up.
No.
You're right on. Yeah. So I would go with Tanner Scott, again, another kind of late round dart throw, but I don't think they're going to go with a closer. Cause you remember last year, I mean, they started out, I think, and they had Sulcer in there and he was actually pitching pretty well. But then all of a sudden he wasn't getting saves and then he pitched poorly. And then it was like Larkins or whatever his name was came in, and then it was Valdez. And, I think it's just going to be a jumble. I think they're very much a team that does not focus on saves at all.
Yeah, well, when you win 40 games, it's tough to focus on saves. But
sure. They should have spent real high on. They should have signed Liam Hendrix. That's what their team needed. Really lock down those wins.
Yeah, lock down those 4 blown saves you get this year. I like Scott too. Like I said, I have him a lot of places. I don't mind Valdez. The one reason why I think Valdez can be interesting at times, besides multiple guys getting saves, like you mentioned, is, Scott does strike out a lot of guys, 27% K rate last year, over 30% the previous 2 years, but he's had a walk rate of 11.6 or higher in all 4 MLB seasons. He walks a lot of guys, so the circus can show up. And if you guys listened to the Triple Play show last week, I talked about Brian Wilson. It's stressful. It's very stressful. And every now and then you get an oops, and that stressful turns into a big blown save. So that's just something to keep in mind. Scott's, I think, the better pitcher, like you said. He's looked great this spring. He's the guy I'm drafting. But Valdez is interesting. It's one of those, if you can stash a guy, stash him. Even if you don't draft him, like if you're trying to figure out who to pick up in Fab in the early weeks and you got no one else, go get him for $1. Just put him on your roster just in case something happens. You have to drop him again, drop him. Doesn't cost you a lot, but he's going to get his at some point this season. It will happen, but Scott's the guy I want as well. All right, the last team I had down here, there's probably many other nasty situations, but I want to talk about a good baseball team. We talked about the Orioles, the Phillies, the Reds. Let's talk about San Diego. San Diego Padres, you have Drew Pomeranz, who Greg Jewett on his closer sheet still has as a closer, which is up for debate to many. You have Emilio Pagan, you have Mark Melanson, and you have Keoni Kella, all 4 guys with previous saves situations, basically, saves experience. I want Drew Pomeranz to be the closer, but part of me says Mark Melanson is going to be the closer because they signed him. They had no reason to sign him otherwise. They could have signed some other reliever just to be a reliever. This is a very, very nasty situation that I'm having a very tough time drafting them. So I'm pretty much avoiding it, even though I know they're going to win a ton of baseball games. So what's your thoughts on San Diego?
I say draft the last guys. I mean, that's my thoughts on the situation generally. I mean, with
ADP for you.
With Pomeranz, remember last year at the start of the season, they didn't have him as the closer. I think he's the best reliever in that pen, but I don't think they. And again, like where I'm soft on, where I don't pay a lot of attention to is like beat writer stuff on closer situations. So I may have blind spots here, but with Pomeranz, when he started out last year, he was not the closer, and he got kind of pegged as the closer by default. And he, I think that he's a high leverage guy for them. He's the best reliever. He can get out righties, he can get out lefties. He's dominant. I think they want him to be in that position because they're a good team and they want to have him in the highest leveraged situations. Melanson, I think one of the reasons why they got Melanson is because of the type of pitcher he is, which is a pitcher that throws Mark Melansons, which a Mark Melanson is when you throw an inning pitched, you have a whip that's way higher than 1, but you somehow find a way through double plays or loading the bases and then deciding to strike people out to get out of the inning without giving up any earned runs. And one of the reasons why he can do that is because he's an extreme ground ball pitcher. And I'm not sure they have that profile on any other of their relievers, just because of I think the organizational philosophy. They have a lot of high K guys, but a lot of fly ball guys, which I think we saw last year with their bullpen gave up a ton of big home runs. And so I think that for me, Melanson kind of serves that role where maybe he comes in an inning where they need to get a ground ball, or he's just kind of like a guy who pitches a lower leverage situation, because I don't think he's a very good reliever. Emilio Pagan can be very, very good. He also has not been so good sometimes as well, right? Like he's a extreme fly ball pitcher. He gives up a lot of hard contact and home runs, but he also has dominating stuff. And then I think one guy who's on Greg's list, which I'm very intrigued by, is Keoni Kella. I have not seen anything at all linking him to the closer's job, but I know that he has been lights out. He's been a closer before. There's no doubt about the stuff. And so why not?
Yeah.
Why not? He's hit free agency, so you don't have to worry about arbitration or anything like that. I loved Pierce Johnson, during the draft champion season. So I have a lot of him on my teams, which I think is just going to be like a big donut for saves. But so they've got some other bullpen, but Kella's very interesting to me.
Yep.
So, and I don't know if he's a guy that you draft in a 30 round league, but he's certainly some guy that I'm monitoring extremely closely.
Yeah, no, when they signed Kella and Maranta, I got really bummed because if it was just Pomerantz and Pagan, we can make that work. I got no problem with that. And I don't disagree with your Melanson take because I just don't think he's got the closer stuff, the dominating closer stuff anymore. Like the Giants, I watched that wreck. Atlanta, he made it work, but it was never pretty. Kella, I like a lot. I was hoping he'd get back to closing in Pittsburgh last year, but it just never really came to be. When it comes to Pomerantz, he's the highest drafted, like around 180. Melanson, I think, like 230. Pagan's 350. Kella's not getting drafted right now. Pomerantz, I think, gives the kind of Taylor Rogers minus all the saves, where he'll get a few, but he's the high leverage guy. They're going to bring him in when it matters the most. Where Pagan, Melanson, Kella, that could get interesting. It could be like a Rays situation back there, where you never know really what's going to happen. So it's just super tough. I don't mind drafting any of them in deeper leagues. Like we're going to have saves holds questions later, and I think Pagan I actually drafted like my last pick in Tout Wars in the saves hold league because he's going to get so many chances back there to do stuff. It's just a very tough situation to attack in drafts. But you mentioned take the lowest guy. Pagan's going at 350. Kella's not even getting drafted. So Kella could be like a Cesar Valdez, where just keep him on the waiver wire in your mind. Like if you start seeing Kella pitch in the 8th once in a while or something, go jump on him for $1 the next week because he's going to start sliding into some saves before you know it. And at worst, he should get you a lot of strikeouts and maybe a win here and there. So the Padres are going to be good. So just think about it that way. Look at the positive angles besides just saves at all times.
Yeah, and I love what you said there about holds leagues. Like in holds leagues, I would target the hell out of the Padres bullpen. Yeah.
Yeah, we got a saves hold question coming up that I'm going to spew a lot of stuff because I've played in saves holds for a while, and now I actually have to really play in one this year. So I have a few thoughts on those when we get to that situation. Yes, the Padres idea is definitely one of them. That'll wrap us up kind of by our review of the position. We have a lot of listener questions here that should probably cover some other stuff, but it's a mess of a deal. If you have more questions, hit us up if we don't answer them somehow tonight. But it's a moving board, and like I would say is check out Greg Jewett's board. It's free. It's a sheet, and you subscribe to his Coffees and Closers. It's an email that comes free every morning. I wake up. I talked about it with Bloomfield, and I talked about it last week. Literally, we wake up in the morning, and on the West Coast, it's already in our email. So I don't know what time it comes out on the East Coast. I don't even look at the time. Every morning, it's there. It's basically mining the news for relievers. He has all the beat writer quotes. He's got everything you need, and that's how he updates his board all the time. So it's free. All you got to do is give me your email. So go check that out. I would recommend it if you're curious about more saves stuff. Listener questions. Peter Smith at PTR Smith 08. What relief pitchers would you target in a head-to-head category league that uses saves, K per 9, and holds as categories? So use saves and holds. You mentioned the Padres situation.
Is it saves and holds or saves and holds? I think it's two separate categories, right?
I'm sorry, Peter, that's dumb. that's just bad. But if that's your league, that's your league. It might be the way he wrote it down. You mentioned it. That might be something different. And if that's the case, I don't even want to answer it right now because I feel like saying something.
I would in that instance, what I would do is target like the Padres bullpen. Where you don't necessarily know where the saves or the holds are going to come from, but they're of equal value, and there are really good relievers there. So those are the types of bullpens that I would want to go after. The A's is another example of a really good bullpen where you have Rosenthal, but then you also have Diekman, you have Trevino, you have Weems, you have who's the guy that I'm forgetting? JB something or other.
Wendelken.
So that's what I would do in that particular situation. And also with a team like that, right, is like with saves and holds, let's say you grab 3, right? Let's say you grab Pagan, Kella, and Pomerantz. then you have the possibility of getting 2 holds and a save in a single win for them, right?
If they win 5 games that week or something, you're rolling.
Totally. And I would target mostly holds guys, but just think of saves and holds as totally. It's head-to-head though, so you need saves and holds.
What I'm going to suggest.
I hate myself.
Well, this is where that's why I got frustrated. But now when you started talking, I started thinking more. Also, the Rays are a great team to target in holds formats because you just don't care anymore. So go get Pete Fairbanks last. Like when I drafted Tout, which just saves and holds combined, like my last 5 picks were all 7th and 8th inning pitchers for holds. Like I drafted Liam Hendrix early. That was the only reliever I drafted early. Or no, it was Glacius. That was it. I didn't draft another reliever until the end of the draft. But for head-to-head, since you're not worried about the overall roto points system, you can punt a category and be okay. So I wouldn't even waste time on saves because you either need to go all in on saves or all in on holds because you don't have enough depth on your starting roster, I'd assume, to do both. So just get a bunch of holds guys late. A lot of 7th, 8th inning guys. Maybe you'll get a save here and there. That's fine. But in head-to-heads, you can punt a category. I just punt saves, load up on more starting pitchers and bats early on, and with late picks, just get all your relievers. That'd be my 2 cents. Focus on holds. Focus on holds and just punt saves. That'd be my 2 cents.
I think that's a great strategy, Bubba. Just a quick update, Bubba. Quick update.
How we doing?
I have 295 points heading into the 4th quarter with LeBron and Kuzma. I need to get, I think, 355, 356 to win the tournament. It's very challenging. Not going to happen.
Yeah, I was about to say, I don't know about that.
Hey, I'm a dreamer. I'm a believer.
I'm pulling for you. I'm a
believer, but I'll take a top 10 finish here. That
would be nice. Good luck.
The good thing is I do have the potential for, actually it's 351. I do have the potential for a LeBron double-double and triple-double bonus.
Yep.
So all he needs is 1 rebound and 3 assists this quarter. So LeBron, I'm looking at you.
That'll happen.
I've never asked for anything from you before, LeBron, or Kirk Kuzma for that matter. But I'm asking for something now.
I was gonna say now.
I just tweeted at LeBron and Kuzma, and I said, "Hey boys, I need 56 points from you in the 4th quarter combined, DraftKings points, not total points. All right, guys." So if you guys could just do a bunch of passing back and forth to each other and hitting threes every single time, that would be awesome. Maybe a couple missed shots for a board for LeBron. I'll be really happy.
Yeah, I'm not going to burst your bubble with any theories or anything. I hope you get it, but I am going to say something. It's funny watching Toby play NBA DFS because he's a baseball mind, and he has called Kyle Kuzma Kurt Kuzma. So that shows you everything.
Did I call him Kurt?
Yes.
I don't even know what his first name is. It starts with K. It says K. Kuzma right there. Right?
I love it. But all right, back to the listener questions here. Our buddy from Triple Play Fantasy, David Mendelson, asks, thoughts on Will Smith? I feel like he gets no love, but I feel he's a closer going underneath a lot of radars. Will Smith in Atlanta. I've personally been drafting Chris Martin, where he's been going later in drafts. How are you attacking Will Smith?
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I don't have any Will Smith. I think he's a really good reliever. I think he'll be very good. I think he'll get some saves. I think Chris Martin will also get some saves. And just because of the cost differential, I'd rather go with Chris Martin. And I'd rather at that spot in the draft target somebody who has access to what I think is going to be all the saves. It could be that Will Smith gets all the saves, right? But I don't necessarily think that's going to be the case. But he could be a huge boon if he does. So why not?
Yeah, Will Smith at 172, Chris Martin at 302.
Yeah,
I'll take my chances.
Yeah.
It's kind of you guys should be sensing a theme by now. If there's any questions, not an obvious 70-30 split or something, take the value. Rev D-Bone, he sent me a DM because he asked a question a while back that we did not get to because that was my bad. So he has 2 questions. He has a closer question and then a starting pitcher question from before. But we'll start. Got a couple questions for the pod. Who is your favorite save spec currently going outside the top 300? His is Jake McGee, Chris Martin, or Ottavino. Those are the 3 he's targeting. We just mentioned Chris Martin, who I've been drafting. I love Jake McGee. I think he is the Giants guy for now, even though Reyes Maranta is the better pitcher. So those are both options. Is there anybody post 300 that you've been targeting? Because you are a weight on saves guy.
I think McGee is pre 300.
He must have just moved because, he just said he's at 300 whenever he texted
Oh,
me
is he?
this. So
Is he? Okay.
I don't know what ADP he's using. Let me.
Yeah, I'm probably thinking 15 team leagues too.
He's 270 now.
Okay.
So, yeah, he's moved up.
Yeah. Of those guys, Martin.
Yep.
McGee Martin, who's the other one?
Ottavino.
Yeah, I think Martin. Just because I think he's a really good pitcher. He doesn't walk guys, strikes out a decent amount of guys. I think he'll have access to saves on the Braves. I think the Braves will be better than the Red Sox will be, and I trust the skills more than I do for Ottavino, who struggles against, who has historically struggled against lefties.
And then a couple other guys that we've mentioned on the show: Tanner Scott, 347, Lucas Sims, 349, and just for Covey Knoll and everybody else listens to the show, Nick Whitgren's at 354. If you just want to go get some Cleveland saves, there you go.
There you go.
And then his other question, I apologize for this, and he's been really good about it. He messages me, and I forget. If you have time to sneak it in, we're going to sneak it in for you. Who is your favorite arm between Pablo? These are the three Marlins starting pitchers: Pablo Lopez, Sixto Sanchez, Sandy Alcantara. He wanted us to rank those three, how we'd approach them in drafts.
Lopez, Alcantara, and Sanchez in that order for me.
100% on the same page. If you want volume, it's Sandy. If you want the best overall pitcher, that should be the best overall pitcher, it's Pablo. If you just want to have fun and watch GIFs all day, it's Sixto. But that doesn't really help. That doesn't really help your fantasy team.
GIFs don't get you no fantasy.
Nope. All I'll say is you should listen to the mega pod between the pitcher list, Alex Fast, Nick Pollock, and the Rates and Barrels guys, DVR and Eno Saris. They had a really good Sixto Sanchez discussion. So I recommend people check that out. It was very, very good it was fun because they were all comparing their rankings and where they differed, and they had discussions on why they differed and stuff like that. Sixto was one.
I got to listen to that pod.
It was and they even said it at the end, well, we could do this for 3 more hours. I'm like, there's been a lot of long pods lately, but that's one, the way they were discussing their differences. I was like, this is intriguing to me. I could sit and listen to this one. But Lil Book of Calm, CALM, says, in a standard 5x5 league, how valuable are saves versus quality innings from relief pitchers? Example, Brad Hand is projected for 30 saves with a 3.6 ERA and 70 strikeouts, while Nick Anderson is projected for 15 saves but a 3.1 ERA and 100 strikeouts. How bad must the relief pitcher be before their saves aren't worth their stats? Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it's a really good question. First of all, I never look at projected saves.
Yeah.
Just because
you just can't project that stuff.
It's like pitcher wins. It's
hard to project wins. Yeah, let's say wins.
It's hard enough to project just pitchers in general.
Pitching projections are the hitters' projections is much more easier than pitchers' projections, I would think.
Yeah. And so, it's a really good question. I mean, because it's not just a question of which one is more valuable, right? It's also opportunity cost. So it's kind of like, in the example that you gave, Nick Anderson is going later and fewer saves versus Brad Hand earlier and saves. So in a standalone league, I would probably go towards Anderson just because you don't need to finish as high in saves, right? And you can protect your ratios. The reason why saves, at least in the NFBC competitions that I focus on primarily, they're generally overalls. And so you need to have saves. You don't have to have saves. So I think in a standalone league, I would lean towards Anderson in that case because he is so good. And I think the ratio benefit outweighs the save benefit. But in like an overall competition or something like that, you need to have saves. And so I think in that instance, I'd rather have Hand if they're straight up. But again, they're not going at the same cost. And so it's also just a question of what hitters are you missing out or what starting pitchers are you missing out on by grabbing the guy earlier as well? And who are you missing out on at that pick 150? So I don't think it's one where you can say this one definitely outweighs that one. I just think that those are kind of the considerations as you draft. And then another question ultimately is, can you get the next Nick Anderson off the waiver wire, right? Yeah. Maybe not the next Les Anderson, but there's always elite arms in the bullpen that come out of nowhere. And you can tell pretty quickly that they're going to be really, really good. And so I would just draft good players because they're still available at that point in the draft and and draft those ratio guys later or speculate on saves later. That's my general focus.
And it's a good point. Like with Nick Anderson, Devin Williams, try to find the next one of them instead of drafting them per se. So that's one way to definitely go about it. Nessie at Little Fantasy Mo says, I've heard that K to walk percentage is relatively sticky over time and correlates well with ERA. My Dynasty League has saves and holds, doesn't specify if they're separate or not. So role isn't important. So it must mean they're the same. Okay. Is it a viable strategy to build a bullpen based on the K to walk percentage leaderboard? 2018 to 2020, top 15 includes Duffy, May, Green, and Gallegos. I'd say that's not a bad way to start.
Yeah, I don't think it's a bad way to start either, but I don't think you should look at that large of a sample size.
True. Because especially in bullpens.
Yeah, just because there's so much fluctuation year to year. So I'd just identify high-skilled bullpen arms. So like May is a good example of, I think, a high-skilled bullpen arm. Gallegos is an example of a high-skilled bullpen arm. With Duffy, for instance, like you have to look at the recent context, like the decreased velocity. I have a lot of concerns about what he's going to do bullpen-wise. And so that would be an example of a guy where I wouldn't want to get him right now because of what's happening just recently. And I know it's just spring training. But I'm going based on the velocity, right? He's under 90, I think, averaging under 90, which just makes all of his pitches worse because he's got that really good slider, I think it is. So that's kind of how I would approach that from my perspective.
Yeah, and like we mentioned, Greg Jewett's chart, Roster Resource has their bullpen metrics, whatever. You can see like a whole overall bullpen depth chart, basically. Just start looking at good teams with good seventh, eighth inning relievers. Look at that route because it changes so much. The reliever landscape changes year to year, so just keep an eye on that. Jordan S. writes, what to do when closers are overvalued in your auction league? At what point do you punt saves versus paying the extra cost to complete in that category? For me personally, I don't do a lot of auctions to begin with, but the idea of paying a lot of money for a closer, if it's an AL, if it's a combo like mixed league, is crazy to me. I just get a bunch like $1 and $2 guys late. But what about you?
So it's an auction league. Sorry, LeBron James just got a triple double. Just wanted to.
That was a given though. That was a given.
Just check. I'm just So it's an auction league. Is it AL only? You said, or it's not?
It didn't. I said if it was a mixed league, I wouldn't even pay for saves. If it's an only league, I could see the appeal of like getting like two guys and just locks it all down for you.
And it's just an auction league. That's the only question.
He says
it's an auction league.
Basically, at what point do you punt saves versus paying the extra cost to complete it in that category? Basically, when closers are overvalued in the auction. When you say screw it, I'm not.
Yeah, I mean, I think that would be the last thing that I would want to spend on. Yeah. And so I think like in the auction, I mean, maybe even. I mean, I don't know. I will preface this by saying I don't play auctions, so this is all just thinking about it. If I saw that closers were going too much, I would wait and try to target some of the lower closers once people started running out of money. And I don't know if this is a viable strategy or people try this regularly, but there's a lot of relievers that have the possibility of getting saves. And I don't know whether it's a strategy in auction leagues just to save like a bunch of $1 bids, at the end of the auction or even during the auction, where you just throw out like, for $1, I'm going to throw out like, who are some guys that we talked about, like Lucas Sims, or for $1, I'm going to throw out, Kyle Crick of the Pirates or Neris, So if you do enough of those, because the thing is, and again, I think it depends on the rules and when your first fab run is in that auction. But if the fab run is before the season, then that's kind of the strategy is you throw those bids out, you get those guys, and maybe one or two of them hit, you hope. And if not, then you just toss them out and you go after other guys. So anyways, is that too rudimentary? Is that too basic?
No, that's exactly what I just said. That's why, Mike, you agree with me.
I agree with you. Yeah. I'm sorry. I shouldn't be distracted while I'm on this podcast, but.
Zaddy Guerrero Jr. asks, was going to ask the same thing, when to punt saves, but more viable in AL NL only leagues. So AL NL only, I think we agree. I'd pay for saves, but all right, would you punt in an AL NL only as well?
I mean, I think I never like to punt a category But I think it's if a standalone league, then I think you strategically try to think about look at the standings in previous seasons and try to think about what your general target is for saves. And then whatever you think can get you there. So maybe it's just get one closer or those speculative ads. I mean, I don't want to give the same answer to every single question, but it's like, I'm a speculator.
Yep. You are. Ryan Bloomfield writes about you every week. It's the Toby.
Oh my God. I live in gold country, so I'm just like, it's the new 21st century speculator is on saves in fantasy baseball.
Love it. Doug Fraley Jr. asks, I've always lobbied for holds to be considered a standard category. What's your take on diversifying the relief pitcher landscape more in the fantasy mainstream? Funny you asked that, Doug. Tout Wars this year, I am in a new league where they did saves and holds to get rid of saves. And I've played in the saves and hold leagues for quite a long time in this one league I've been in. But it's, yes, industry-wise, it's not a deal. But the geniuses behind Tout, Chandler and Zola and Erickson and all that, they've been thinking about ways to do it. And they incorporated holds to make it saves and holds for the exact reasoning you were talking about, or one of the reasons you were talking about. And I think it's a great way to go about it. I think we're going to see how it works this year. The only thing I'll say is kind of like my strategy, and if you're curious, want to read, there's an article on it. But you really don't have to be aggressive on closers, and so your drafting is different because literally, if it saves and holds, there's so many holds out there. There really are, and there's so many holds on the waiver wire, like throughout the season. So it changes that respect of it. But I think it's with the way the game's moving. I think it makes more sense because we went through like 6 or 7 teams that have committee issues, and there's a lot more than that. So there's a reason why people are paying for saves. There's questions about paying for saves because locking down quote unquote set saves is not easy anymore. So I think it's going that direction. Any thoughts for you, Toby?
Yeah, I think I hate the idea, honestly. I think it totally devalues. I mean, just because a category is scarce, just because it's hard, doesn't mean you abandon it. When you move to save and holds, you totally eliminate so much of the strategy.
You do. Yeah.
You it's not unlike for me the 2 catcher thing. The argument is catchers aren't good. So why do you need to roster 30 of them, right? And I can understand why it's no fun to do that. Number one, you don't have to do that. You can draft good catchers. That is a strategy to employ. But
they get hurt so easily, Toby. Why would you do that? Sorry, continue. Sorry.
But again, like everybody can like the game that you like. You should play the game that you think is most fun. For me, strategically, the saves piece is challenging. Even though I not punt saves, even though I wait on saves, I have a very different approach than a lot of people on saves. It's still part of an overall strategy, right? Of recognizing that you are going to leave a draft with a weakness and taking your chances there. Whereas with holds, like why would I draft any relief pitcher in the first? I mean, if I was like literally, if I was in a 30-team draft, my last 3 picks would be relief pitchers.
It's true.
And they'd be like whoever I thought on the Padres wasn't going to get the closer role, or whoever was left over, or the A's, or all these other really, really good bullpens. And I just really don't like that. If they were to make that switch, it would really take a lot of the fun out of the game, I think.
Yeah, we'll see. Like, I'm curious to see where it keeps going. There's been chatter about it for a while now, but yeah, I agree. I literally did not need to draft any closer if you didn't want to. I'm curious to see how it plays out though, because there were guys that drafted closers like it was normal. Yeah. And I'm curious to see how that finishes the regular season. It's going to be interesting, to say the least, because the difference is the only difference I can think of is you can get closers with 30 to 40 saves, where the most holds you see is like, 20 to 25. So I guess it turns into that kind of counting. And that's where I think it'll get interesting to see where that plays out.
Yeah.
You can stream you can stream holds so easy. It's like streaming starting pitchers, but easier.
Totally. And the thing is, and yes, it's like I know that the push is to get like, well, you should be drafting the highest skilled reliever.
Yes.
And it's like, well, great. Like we don't know right now who the highest skilled relievers are going to be. We don't know. I would gamble that 5 of the 10 highest skilled relievers are not even going to be drafted. In the first 30 rounds.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's like, you could look for those guys and try to draft those guys as part of your strategy. So maybe that's a new strategy, but I don't really think it's a strategy because you can just pick those guys up off the waiver wire like nobody's business.
Yep. And like holds, if you think about it, holds even bad teams like the Giants and stuff, you get a Javi Lopez, like a loogie. Like, and obviously you can't do that anymore. They have to throw to 3 batters. But you used to be able to get like a lefty guy, is coming in for 1 or 2 batters. He might get you a strikeout, low ratios, and get you a hold, like 3 or 4 holds a week, because that's all you do. Had no outcome on the game pretty much whatsoever, but it's a hold. So it's a finicky category. I get both sides of the argument. I'm curious to see how it plays out because I thought more people would just say screw it like I did and just wait till the end. And a lot of guys did it business as usual. So I'm very curious to see if you do need those closers to win saves and holds. I don't think you do, but I'm curious. So that'll be fun to see. Cody Mack, our buddy Comac and there's no soccer involved here. My league uses net saves, which really makes it hard to carry non-closers. Is the definition of a save antiquated? Why can saves be blown in the 6th inning when the percentage of saves awarded to relievers coming in that early is so very low? Also, how do I convince my league to change?
Yeah, that's a tough one because it's such a strong disincentive to have a guys that aren't in the closer role in that particular instance. So, I guess it partially does its job in some ways, but and blown saves are like if your closer comes in with the bases loaded and they're in the 9th inning and they give up a sacrifice fly, they've blown the save, but the other guy gets the loss, but it's like you get the blown save. So I don't know. Stop messing around with these convoluted
formats
things.
Yeah.
I know. I don't want to come off as like a, like conservative traditionalist when it comes to it. But I think the reason why these categories have stuck for as long as they have is because they're multifaceted from a strategic perspective, which is not to say that the other ones aren't, but
I think the argument now is the value or the save, or I guess the situation of a save is so much different than it was even 5 years ago.
Yeah.
So it's a weird situation.
I know. I'm no fun on these ones.
John Gaser asks, who is your top closer in waiting? There's a lot of them. I'm going to say that right out the gate. Obviously, I'm a fan of Nick Wittgren. I could probably name off like 6 or 7 guys. Do you have a top closer in waiting for you?
Top closer in waiting. I'll just go through here and let you know who I like. Chris Martin, I don't know if he's a closer in waiting, but obviously like him. Let's see. Closer in waiting. I don't think Richard Rodriguez is going to have the job with the Pirates. I feel like they've said that he's not going to have the job. So I guess Kyle Crick maybe, or David Bednar, who I think is really good. Rule 5 pick. He's been lights out this spring. So those are 2 guys. That's the NL, kind of closers of interest thing. You mentioned Wittgren. Like, I love Wittgren. He's a guy that I would really like. Yeah, I don't know if there's closers in waiting, really. I don't necessarily love the closers in waiting. I like a lot of the closers that are going late.
Yeah. I guess if I had to name any other ones, like Scott Barlow with Kansas City, because eventually Greg Holland's going to be gone at some point in time. He's either going to lose the job or he's going to get traded. I have a lot of Greg Holland too, but let's be realistic. He's either getting traded or he's losing the job at some point. He's not going to be there.
Well, according to the spring training record of the Royals, they're going to win the division. So there's no reason they'll have to trade him.
Seattle, Kendall Graveman, I keep an eye on as much as that pains me to see. He's actually good out of the bullpen last year, and Montero's Montero. We talked about that already. So that's someone to keep an eye on. I know you're a Jose Leclerc guy. I am not. So it was Joely Rodriguez for me. Ian Kennedy is on the radar now, which is terrifying, but he's there also. But yeah, there's not a lot of great ones. Nick Wittgren's my favorite one, but It's nasty. It's nasty to say the least. Our last listener question, Rakesh Patel at Unicorn 500 asks, would love to hear some of your favorite sparks or bulk inning relievers. Funny you mentioned that, Rakesh.
Ooh, you got this one because you know me, I'm bad at this.
I've been trying to write every day just to kind of keep my mind fresh, and it helps me, kind of do things. So I write a little blurb here and there, and I did some long relievers because everyone's talking about Freddie Peralta, and I think he's awesome. He's a very, very good one, but he might actually make the rotation now. So he's not a long reliever anymore. But when I was in love with him, he was a long reliever. So I think he's really, really good. I've been growing more fond of Michael Kopeck because they basically said they want him for 70 to 100 innings, kind of in a long reliever role. So I think he's very, very intriguing. If you can get him in short 2 to 3 inning spurts where he can still throw 99 to 100 plus, he's going to get a lot of strikeouts for you. So I think he's very, very intriguing. You mentioned Jose De Leon earlier. I think he is an awesome spark if he does not make the rotation because he will be their long man in Cincinnati. He's looked outstanding this spring. He's always had the prospect pedigree. He just can't stay healthy. He'd be one I'd have circled. For the Tampa Bay Rays, the king of sparks, Josh Fleming, is an outstanding one. He had 5 wins in a shortened season. He's basically their new Ryan Yarbrough. So I think Fleming is one I'd circle in a big, big way because he's basically undrafted or very late in drafts. So those are some that I look at now. There's few on all the teams that have chances, but those are some that I have circled at the moment.
Yeah, I think those are all good ones. I assume. Did you mention Freddie Peralta?
Yes, that was the first name I mentioned.
Yeah. Okay. There was a lot of great examples there. That was the one that jumped to my mind. But I'm not good at knowing the relief pitcher eligible guys. And just to keep you guys updated, I'm not getting anywhere close to it here. So yeah,
I wasn't going to say it, but I know LeBron's 40% owned, give or take. So there's a lot of guys in front of you that probably have him.
I know it's Kyle Kuzma.
Kyle, yes, well done.
Kyle Kuzma's fault. He gave me a little icicle.
That's the worst.
Snowflake.
Yep.
Little snowflake on me.
When you get the snowflake, it's over.
So LeBron was great.
He has the flames. He has the flames.
He's got the flames. I love the flames.
Kuzma's got the snowflake.
Yeah.
Yep, I feel you. But that wraps up Relief Pitchers Preview. Final thoughts on one of the favorite positions in all fantasy.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I like to wait on getting closers, which I know isn't everybody's cup of tea. But, saves are going to be really challenging to get this year. But at the same time, we also said that last year, and people managed to do it. And I think it's really something you got to grind and feel comfortable with. And that's one of the reasons why I feel I feel comfortable about grinding and trying to get guys off the waiver wire. I've had decent success with that in the past. And so for that reason, I'm willing to wait, but that's not for everybody necessarily. So recognize where your strengths, where your weaknesses might be, or your perceived strengths and weaknesses, your self-perceived, if that's a thing, strengths and weaknesses, and how that plays into the approach. But I think it should be really fun. I mean, I love watching bullpens and watching guys who come out of nowhere to have a lot of success. So best of luck to all of you. I know this is the last preview review I think that we're doing before the season hits here. So best of luck with all of your fantasy drafts. I hope both the previews from long ago and now the preview reviews have been really helpful to folks. And if not, reach out to us with questions in the meantime.
Yep, always willing to help you out. But like Toby said, there's different ways to go about it. I don't mind trying to get one of the top guys and then kind of getting guys later in the draft. That's my approach. Obviously, Toby does very well with his approach. The only approach I don't really condone, or at least I don't like, is getting 2 of them really early. I think that really, you're passing up on some serious value at that point in time. And then if you're going to work the waiver wires, if you wait too long, it gets too expensive, and that's when it sucks. But do it stuff like Toby does and pay attention and try to be a week early. Like I mentioned a few guys, if you see they're doing well, there's spots potentially opening, get them for $1 a week or 2 early. If they don't get it, you drop them. It doesn't crush you. If you wait till they're actually the closer, that $1 turns into, we've seen it go as high as a couple $100. Like it gets dumb. And then you pray they are the closer when we've seen how many times they end up losing the job again. And that one stings in a big way. So you got to kind of be proactive, but that's the name of Fab. And that's why Toby's really, really good at this stuff is he's jumps on those guys. That's why guys like Vlad and those guys, they're a week, 2 weeks early a lot of times. That's huge, saving money like that. But if you guys have anything else, hit us up with questions. We'll be back with bold predictions or something like that next week, as it'll be our last No, technically we'll have one more episode because it'll be the Tuesday before opening day. Opening day is on Thursday. So we'll have two more episodes. More episodes. If you have more listener questions, like the big draft weekends are this weekend or next weekend. So keep the questions coming, and we'll see what's up.
Is it the 30th or the 31st?
The season starts on the 1st, April 1st, Thursday the 1st.
A Thursday. Okay, so
yeah, I'll be able to do it because I have a draft on the 31st, night of the 31st, and the night of the 29th. So like squeezed in between.
So we'll squeeze in between him. He won't be tired or anything, guys. He'll be good. He'll be tilting one draft.
I won't be totally fried.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have drafts on the day of the 27th, the night of the 28th, the night of the 29th, and the night of the 31st.
Yeah, I'm with you. Mine are loading up in a big way. I'm happy and not at the same time.
Yeah.
It's like I love doing it, but I'm ready to just start the season. Let's do this.
For sure.
But the last thing I'll mention is I'm watching the Giants game as we do this, and Reyes Maranta came on to pitch in the 6th, and I'm a big guy. That boy's healthy right now, like not in a good way, healthy. Like Pablo Sandoval's small about him. So
really?
That's why now if you're
how do you do pitching wise?
He did okay. Like he did good. But you look at Greg Jewett's list, he's in red right now. Next to it, conditioning, it says. Now I know why. That boy big. Yeah. So we're going to have to watch that because he should be the closer. But if he's coming in looking like that, I don't think Kapler's going to want to be too kind to that. But all right, everybody, that'll wrap us up. You can find Toby on Twitter at BatFlipCrazy. I am at BDentric. Go check out both the podcasts, the BatFlip Crazy podcast and the Bench with Bubba podcast. Go rate, review them if you haven't already. All that fun stuff. But until next time, this was your relief pitcher preview review. Catch you guys later.